Welcome to the Main Basketball Rankings podcast. I am your host, basketball data nerd, Lucas McNally, and the gold balls have been handed out in soccer and in field hockey, and we had a pretty eventful day for those. I went to the games to one game in Bath for Camden Hills and Scarborough, 0-0, went to penalties. Camden wins in penalties, but the interesting part about this game is the wind was ridiculous. It was gusting 30, 40 miles an hour. Scarborough had the wind at their back for the first half. They were clearly the better team in the first half. They hit the crossbar, had a couple of really good chances. Camden, the goalie, made a couple of really nice saves to keep it 0-0. Then they switched sides, and all of a sudden you're like, geez, Camden's playing a lot better. And then you sort of come to the realization that, oh, it's the wind. The wind's really a factor here. You'd see the goalie would kick into it and the ball would sort of go up and then sort of hold up in the air and drop down. If you try to play a cross through the air, it would get pushed by the wind 3 or 4 yards back and conveniently seemed to find its way to a defender each time. So that was really a factor. And it got to the point as it got windier and windier during the game where you start thinking, geez, can Scarborough even score going in this direction? Got a little better for them when they went to overtime and they got to switch back to having the wind at their back, but Camden had a lot of momentum at that point. Camden was unable to find the back of the nets. They go to penalties and Camden wins in penalties. That's their first gold ball in boys soccer in 33 years, which if you had me guessed when their last gold ball was in boys soccer, I would not have guessed 33 years. I would have guessed something like 6 years or 8 years or something like that. But maybe, you sometimes if a program is really good in boys or girls, you sort of assume they've had the same success on the other side. And the Camden girls, of course, have been great for a long time. A couple of really good games. We had Greenville and Piscataquis. That was not close. Greenville won that 3-0. Greeley beat Baps 3-0. That was not a surprise. Halldale beat Washington Academy 1-0. That was I'm going to say that's their first ever gold ball. I think I saw that online. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And Richmond beat Fort Fairfield 3-2. In girls soccer, Greeley got the sweep. They beat Herman 3-1. Madison beat Dexter 2-1 in overtime. Bangor rallied to beat Scarborough. This was a game where all 3 of Bangor's goals were scored with the wind at their back. Very important distinction. So they beat Scarborough 3-1. NYA blew out Fort Kent 4-0. Penobscot Valley beat Buckfield 2-0. And then in field hockey, we had an overtime game, Winthrop over Dexter 2-1. We had Cheverus beat Brewer 3-1. We'll get into that a little bit later. And Belfast came back to win 2-1, and they won that one on penalty corners, which if you know anything about Actually, I don't know anything about field hockey, and I'm not at penalty corners. I'm assuming what that is the thing. I guess it's not a stroke because a stroke is like a penalty shot. So I'm guessing penalty corners is the thing where they have the ball on the end line and they pass it to a teammate. I'm not entirely sure. So scratch all that. I have no idea what penalty corners are. I'll try to figure it out. I'll ask around and see what that is. But a lot of great activity. And so we've got also this week football coming up. I'm doing a little more research on it. I'm going to probably do another podcast this week, but there's a really interesting story coming out of Rhode Island about a football team that sued to be able to be seated differently in the playoffs. And I'll read you the judge's thing first. They literally kids were getting on buses to go to playoff games, and this team's like, no, we have the wrong matchup. We need to have a different matchup and all this. And people are like, what are you guys doing? So the judge said, certainly this court is sympathetic to the notion that it is a hardship to play a lower seeded team, which could make the path, and I think he means a higher seeded team here, which could make the path to a championship more challenging. However, stopping all games and forcing high school football players across the state to push their playoffs and the championship to an unknown date is certainly more burdensome than having the games continue with Mount Hope starting as the 5th seed. I just can't imagine the audacity of thinking, no, we're gonna shut down everything in order to be a different seed. They thought they were supposed to be the 1 seed just partly because of vibes, partly because they haven't been there before, and sometimes I don't know, you just don't know how things work if you haven't been in the playoffs in a long time, I think. We'll get more into this later this week, but it's an insane story, and I just wanted to do more digging before I give you the full rundown of it. But it's insane. Okay, so football for games this week. We've got the 8-man is going to the state championships. It's a whole thing. They 8-man large doesn't have regions this year. It's just one. So it's Mount Ararat and Greeley. Greeley won the earlier game this year, 30-26. So that looks really interesting. An 8-man small, Stearns and OOB. Both of those teams have been insanely dominant this year. So I don't know. I think a lot of people are going to go with OOB here, but I don't know. A lot of people thought OOB was going to win last year, and they didn't. In A North, it's Bangor and Portland. Portland won the earlier game. The regular season matchup 35-7 in week 6. Thornton Academy and Noble. Thornton Academy won 33-26 in week 5, which was one of the really better games this year. B North, Lawrence and Falmouth. Falmouth 48-3 on week 7. In B South, Kennebunk and Deering. Kennebunk won that one 41-0 in week 5, which is one of the surprising scores where people went, whoa, what just happened there? C North, Herman and Madomic Valley. Herman won that earlier game 14-8. I think that was week 1. It was week 1 or week 2. I went to that game. C South, Freiburg and Levitt. Freiburg won 34-12 in week 5, but I've been wrong on Levitt every single week. So who knows? In D North, Foxcroft and Winslow. Foxcroft won 35-3 in week 3. In D South, Wells and Winthrop. Wells won 30-13 in week 8. Not a lot of those were close. So the Greeley Mount Ararat game was close. The Thornton Academy Noble game was close. The Herman Madomic game was close. The rest of them weren't. So prepare yourself that we could have a not great day of regional finals in football this week. What that could mean is we have, you don't know. Maybe we do. But it's not looking great for the regional finals in football is all I'm saying. So if the weather's bad, you might want to stream these. And I think WHOU will have at least some of them. So on the show today, I've been trying to get this guy on here for a while, but he's very, very busy. Michael Hoffer is here from The Forecaster. He's fantastic. He's, one of the best reporters in the state. And so we get into soccer, we get into football, we get into basketball, of course, field hockey, all sorts of great stuff. So a lot of fun. If you're watching the video of this, I'm wearing a Maine Sting AAU championship shirt. Thanks to Steve Carey. That was in the packet of stuff he sent me earlier this year. So just wanted to mention that and thank him again for that. Go now to my conversation with Michael Hoffer. Okay, Michael Hoffer is here. He's taking a break from writing 10,000-word previews of the state championship games or regional finals. Michael Hoffer, you probably all know as the Forecaster sports editor, writes for Varsity Maine. He's everywhere. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I don't know what to do with myself today. There's no game, so I had to talk about high school sports with somebody.
I know. We've been trying to schedule this for weeks, and you're like, well, I have a game every single day. And I'm like, well, all right.
That's been life pretty much through October and the first week of November. But all of a sudden, I have all this free space on my calendar. I don't know what to do with myself.
It's craziness. And I want to thank you right off the bat because I've been betting your Patriots picks. DraftKings, right. And it's doing pretty well.
I would not invest much money on those picks, but congratulations.
Well, I won yesterday, so that was good.
Yes.
So I usually
which was good.
It usually ends up being the same bet where I end up betting the Patriots to beat the spread and then the under. It ends up usually being, and that's a pretty safe bet for them.
It seems like this year that's hit more often than not. Yeah.
Yeah. How excited are you about Drake May on a 1 to 10 scale?
I would say 9.5. I can't wait to see him when he actually has someone to throw the ball to. And I think he's only going to get better. I mean, he's still making some rookie mistakes. And, let's face it, it's like mid-October for him because he didn't start the first 3-4 games. And no, I'm very excited. There's a lot of work to do around him. But, I'm also encouraged. They're playing hard every week. Really, other than that Jets Thursday night game and maybe the game out in San Francisco, they've been competitive. And, it's just not a great roster. But I think there is some upside there, and I do believe we've got the guy. So, let's just hope the offseason brings some nice presents under the tree, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and just watching Mac Jones yesterday was like, oh my gosh, I remember
if
that.
You needed reinforcement, yes, that was yes.
I'm really enjoying the weird throws when he gets in trouble and he's just trying to avoid the sack and he like throws it left-handed to somebody and you're just like,
it's
okay,
very
very
Mahomesian, and he can make something out of nothing, unlike no Patriots quarterback probably since Steve Grogan. So I don't want to see him run all that often and get hit all that often, but it's nice to know that if you need someone to scramble for 15 yards on 3rd and 12, he can certainly do it.
Yeah, it's been very encouraging, and I don't know, I think he's been better than I expected him to be.
Yeah, especially at this early date. I had a feeling he was going to develop into something good, but you can already see the flashes of potential greatness, and let's just hope that continues.
Yeah. All right, so let's go pivot to high school. If I'm reading this correctly, did you have 3 games on Saturday you did?
I did. I did the 3 games in Bangor, the C girls and the 2 boys game, the 2 B games, yeah.
Okay. So the ones I saw bylines on you for were the Greeley John Baptist boys, the NYA Fort Kent girls, and then the Chevers field hockey game.
Okay, so I also did the Greeley Herman girls game. The Chevers field hockey states I just caught up with after the fact, although I did do the regional final. So I was not present for their state game, but I still tried to recapture it as much as possible. And that's too good a story not to touch on one final time.
Yeah, and the craziness of it being Brewer there and not Skowhegan.
Yeah, right.
Gotta be the greatest record in state.
It's funny how Wednesday night, just literally as the Chevers Biddeford regional final was ending, all of a sudden there was a buzz. Brewers had 3-0 ahead of Skowhegan, and it's just no one knew what to do with themselves. The Chevers players, coaches, I mean, they're so attuned to, all right, if we get to the state game, we know who we're going to play. And they did the last 3 years and not this time. So, and I wouldn't say that they necessarily even looked at that as an advantage. It was just strange, I think. And I think they were going to be fired up for the state game no matter what. And, they scored 2 goals in the first quarter and went on to the victory. And there was no way Lucy Johnson was losing her final high school game. It was that simple. I felt that way for a while.
Yeah, and at some point you go, well, we got Skowhegan and they're probably scouting Skowhegan a little bit.
Right.
And then
naturally
we gotta throw all that out, I guess.
Right. But that's great. I mean, you see these dynastic runs and someday it's got to come to an end. And when it does, it's so stunning. It's so sudden. It's kind of not fluky because Brewer beat him during the regular season, but there have been other years where Skowhegan lost to, say, a Messalonsky in the regular season, and maybe he wasn't even the 1 seed, but they would always find a way to win in the playoffs in the regional final. And, it's just natural to assume that was going to happen again. But not only did it not happen again, I mean, Brewer won convincingly. So, kudos to them for a great season. I know it didn't end the way they wanted it to on Saturday, but they really stole some headlines along the way.
I was talking to Mike Mandel about this somewhere at some game, and we were wondering, do we know if there's players on that team whose like mothers were on in the original run?
Over 22 years, it's not impossible to think there might be some crossover there, no question. I don't know. I'm just not familiar with the program and the names, but I mean, you do the math. It's possible.
It's certainly likely, Okay, and I just wanted to point out, maybe you noticed this, but you had the worst games Saturday. You got none of the good games.
I know, that's how it goes. So you win some, you lose some. I had some great regional finals for field hockey and soccer. So those rounds, those games were better. And to be honest with you, Lucas, I'm up in Bangor. I'm thinking the earliest I'm leaving is 8:00. So I want all these games to end in regulation, and I'm not disappointed I didn't get overtime, PKs, any of that stuff. They got that stuff down at Bath for the A games, and I've seen plenty of great dramatic games this year, this week. So the fact that I just got out of there on schedule was not a bad thing.
It's a long drive, too.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so there were 4, if people don't know, there were 4 overtime games on Saturday, which sounds like a lot to me for a state games, and 2 of them went to penalty, 1 to penalty corners and 1 to penalty kicks. My other question for Bangor is, how windy was it up there?
Oh, and that was the worst part, especially the earlier games. The wind was absolutely howling. I mean, it was around 50 degrees, so I think it would have been a tolerable day. But the wind was howling. It was certainly a factor strategically. And, the teams that had the wind at their back had a lot more success scoring goals than the teams that didn't. But, it's November. We've had a great fall. It's really hard to complain with the weather when we've had so many great warm days. Even last Tuesday, Wednesday was unseasonably warm. So,
Today.
I've had worse. If we can get through 2 more weeks without rain on Friday or Saturday, I'll be thrilled.
Yeah, I was at the Camden Scarborough boys game, and the wind was absolutely a factor. And it was the point in the second half where you're like, I don't know if Scarborough can score going in this direction the way they were playing, because they were playing a lot of long balls and a lot of ball in the air, and Camden was keeping it closer to the ground. And you could just see the ball just kept getting knocked down, kept getting thrown off path, and it looked really difficult.
Yeah, the NYA Fort Kent game, all of NYA's 4 goals came in the first half, all with the wind. And, the second half, they were content. If Fort Kent had a lot of shots, couldn't finish. But no question, going toward that one end of the field, that's where the goals were. I think pretty much in all the games, maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions, I feel like almost all the goals came in that direction.
Did you notice that, goals aside, that the teams played better with the wind on their back? Because it really looked like the game I saw, Camden dominated the half they had the wind. And Scarborough was better in the half they had the wind, and you just sit there. You're wondering if you're Scarborough, we had chances to score in that first half, and
you lament the fact that you didn't get the one, and sometimes that's all you need. But yeah, I think the teams that had the wind at their back, which just played with more confidence, and that the other team was defensive anyway, and then you're just really hoping that you're not going to get a crazy bounce or crazy wind gust. I mean, it's hard enough to contend with the other team that's a championship caliber team, but all of a sudden you're dealing with these weird elements too. So it was most certainly a big factor. I think the better teams won regardless. I don't think that maybe you can make a case for Scarborough down where you were, but certainly where I was, both Greeley teams were favored. NYA girls, I think, were pretty prohibitive favorites, and that's how it all played out.
Yeah, there was the talk. I went to the regional finals in B up at Hamden, and the thing people were saying was, this is kind of the state championship game in a way for us, because nobody's beating Greeley.
Right. And that's just historically. I mean, you look over the last 30 years on the boys' side in Class B, it's only happened once where the North has beaten the South, which is just crazy. And granted, there have been a ton of great Falmouth and Yarmouth and Greeley teams over the years, but you got to figure there's going to be a crazy bounce in there somewhere or else.
It's soccer.
Yeah, it's soccer. And then, the girls' side, in recent years, it's been pretty dominated by the South, but there have been some instances of the North winning. So Class A is a lot more even over the years, but Class B, it's a pronounced difference for the South.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's just you have more year-round players. Let's not to diminish what exists in the rest of the state. There's a lot of really good players, but you don't have 10, 12 guys playing out of season or playing together in Premier from the age of 8 on, or whatever the case may be. And I also think the regular season schedules, the Western Maine Conference, the SMAA, those are the best conferences in the state. And that, I'm not being biased. That's just how it is. These teams, iron sharpens iron, and these teams bring out the best in each other all season long. Once Greeley survives Cape in a regional final, or once Greeley survives Yarmouth in a regional final, they know the state game is not going to be near as competitive. They don't want to have a letdown, but certainly, you get through those teams. That's your biggest test more often than not.
It's just interesting to me that in soccer it's such a pronounced difference, but in basketball it's not.
Yeah.
And it's the same communities and it's the same resources and all that.
Yep. Well,
maybe the county's so good at basketball.
That, or you have 5 people on the floor as opposed to 11 people on the field. I think maybe that levels things up a little bit. basketball is such an ingrained part of those communities, more so than down here in the Portland area where, yeah, we have a lot of great basketball players, but a lot of those guys are playing other things. Maybe it doesn't mean as much in Cape Elizabeth as it does in Presque Isle, or Caribou, like we saw in that state game a few years ago down here, where the whole side of the Civic Center was, it was an incredible environment. And that's not to say that basketball is not huge in Cape Elizabeth, but it doesn't mean as much to the whole town as it would in a place like Caribou, Presque Isle, those places.
Yeah, I don't know that you're getting that many people if the game's in Holton to go from Cape Elizabeth to
no chance.
Well, I mean, they didn't bring as many people from Cape Elizabeth to Portland, as
so
Caribou.
What does that tell you?
Portland that day.
Yeah, a lot of times you don't see big crowds, even big Portland, Deering, Cheverus, South Portland. They get good crowds, but it's not the whole community, and that's just the nature of the fact. The state, it's a very different state from south to north.
Yeah. Okay. So one question I have for you: what if you had to pick a team that you saw this year, a soccer or field hockey team, since they're done, and we'll do football in a bit.
Sure.
What's a team that you saw that didn't win a gold ball that was that impressed you, that maybe flew a little under the radar, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there were some of the teams that almost won. Class A boys soccer all season had. We were talking all year. Any of 6, 8, 10 teams can come out, and as fate would have it, the top 4 teams all won their quarterfinals, and it wound up being the 3 and the 4 seed in the regional final. The Portland boys lived a charmed life all season. Their first 3 games they won in overtime. Wow. Kind of ironic that they get knocked out in the postseason in overtime, but they had a great run. The Yarmouth field hockey team, they've been in Freeport's shadow all season. They lost to Freeport in a double overtime epic in last year's regional final. They lost to Freeport in the first game this year. Then both teams ran the table the rest of the way. Freeport had been to states 2 years in a row, won it last year. I think most people thought they'd figure out a way to get through there again. But, Yarmouth just did a great job playing as a team, playing without a star. And they even had a 1-0 lead in the third quarter the other day against Belfast. They just couldn't hold it, but a tremendous run there. But no shortage of great teams in a lot of these sports, and that's my blessing and my curse. Is I've always got a lot of teams in contention. Of course, that means that the season goes right up to the very end, and there's a lot of teams that are battling for championships right up to the very last day. So I don't get an early break on the seasons, but that's okay. It makes it more fun.
Plus, you don't get like half the tournament off.
Right. That's never happened, and I'm guessing it never will.
Yeah, like in basketball, you might get like a couple sessions off here and there, but it seems less like that in the fall sports.
Yeah, especially a sport like soccer, where really, you look at Cape Elizabeth and Falmouth and Greeley and Yarmouth and Scarborough. I mean, these are powerhouse soccer towns going back a half century. They're always going to be one of the last teams standing, if not the last team standing. And that's just, it kind of comes with the territory. Field hockey's hit or miss. There've been some years I didn't have anyone in a state game, but of recent vintage, with Cheverus becoming a powerhouse, with Freeport becoming a powerhouse, there's that too. I just wish those state games were on different weekends, but no one's consulting with me.
Right. I think the Cheverus girls, I haven't looked at this recently, and I should have. I think they actually have the biggest lead in the power rankings of like any of the sports.
Yeah, not surprising.
I think it was last year too.
Yeah, I mean, you think they went 71-1 over 4 years. Their one loss was by a goal to Skowhegan in the state game 2 years ago. It was a game I think most people thought Cheverus was going to win because they had won the year before 4-1. They wound up losing that game. That's it. They never lost a single game in the South, regular season, postseason. They're on a 36-game win streak right now. And this was a program that before Lucy Johnson got there, that was always competitive, had even been to one state game before in 2010. But they're nowhere near the juggernaut they are now. And you're just, that this kind of thing perpetuates itself at private schools where everyone's going to want to go play field hockey at Cheverus or basketball at Cheverus. And, if you're sick of Cheverus field hockey, I have bad news for you. I don't think they're going anywhere. They might come back to the pack slightly. I think maybe Biddeford will be the favorite going into next season, but I wouldn't write off the Stags.
Well, yeah, there's a big part of that if you have any amount of school choice at all, for a public school or for a private school, more so. Where are you going to go? Are you going to go to around here? Are you going to go to Wiscasset? Mm-hmm. Because you're going to go to Wiscasset, you're going to lose a lot of games, or you could go to Gardner. Yeah. And, you're in competitive games all the time, and that's not a super hard decision for a lot of people.
No, and I mean, in a perfect world, every community would have the same resources, the same chances, and and the private thing, it comes and goes. I mean, there's a lot of teams at Cheverus that aren't winning, and for the longest time, girls basketball wasn't winning state titles, field hockey wasn't winning state titles. For decades, Macaulay was totally irrelevant. No one even knew what Macaulay was until they became a juggernaut. So these things come and go. Cheverus football was the best team going, a little over a decade ago. Now they were 2-7 this year, even though they were more competitive than their record would suggest. So, that whole public versus private thing is a whole other discussion for another time. And I know people have very strong feelings about it, but it's not as lopsided as you would be led to believe.
No, because you can see situations where it's a private school, but they don't have the youth program, and the youth program is the most sustainable thing in any sport. We all know that.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they can rest on the idea that they're the private school and that they'll get people going there, and then it just doesn't happen. They get beat by the public school team down the road.
Yeah, no question. Like I said, it's cyclical, and there's lots of times that you think the private school is going to win, and they don't. And I think if you have a strong communal program, especially in some of the bigger towns, you're able to definitely compete, because you never know who's coming and going from these private schools. And yes, they have the opportunity to bring in unique talents at time, but people leave too. People leave and go back to their public schools. So it's a two-way street, and there's certainly benefits on the private school side, but for people that think that don't want the private schools involved at all, I think they bring a lot to the MPA and to these tournaments. And I think it'd be really unfortunate if we didn't have these powerhouse teams. Cheverus Thornton Academy, they're not always going to win. I know it feels like they will, but it's not always going to be that way.
Hell, Thornton Academy lost to Levitt last year.
Yes, they did. They lost to Portland in the regular season this year. We'll see if Portland can do it again in the state game if they match up here in a little over a week.
So let's pivot to football, because you gave me a transition there. That was very nice of you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Are you worried? I'm looking at these matchups for this weekend. Are you worried that these games are going to suck? Because a lot of these teams have played already, and not a lot of the games were close.
Right. I mean, that's definitely, especially Class A, Class B. You look at some of these scores, 41
Falmouth
nothing.
beat Lawrence 48-3.
Yeah, 41 nothing. Kennebunk over Deering. I think Portland beat Bangor 35-7. It could have been more. The TA Noble game, I think that's probably the crown jewel here on the schedule, because their regular season game was terrific, and TA needed a late kickoff return for a touchdown just to win that game. And Noble's so fun to watch with Jameer Rose, and just seeing that program be viable again for the first time in almost 30 years. They're going to have a tough time.
They're fun to watch.
Yeah, they're going to have a tough time winning at Hill Stadium on Saturday. Let's be real. But I think, that's a game going into where you're saying, that's a team that really has a shot. I think Deering's going to play Kennebunk a lot closer than the regular season game was. I don't know if they can hang around and win it, but I don't think you're going to look at a 41-point margin again. The fact that Falmouth and Lawrence are playing in the neutral field up at Coney, maybe that levels thing a little bit. Falmouth's never won a regional title, so there's still that pressure. And so you still have those factors kind of to consider going in. Certainly I hope some of these games are good. Can Levitt compete with Freiburg Academy? It's funny to even say that when you think of how great Levitt's been in recent years. Can Winthrop compete with Wells, who seems like they're invincible? I don't know. I mean, I think the 8-man game, the Greeley Mount Ararat game, I think has the potential to be a thriller. They played a 30-26 game here a couple weeks ago. I don't know if anyone can stop Old Orchard, but they're just fun to watch, period. So there's going to be some compelling. There's going to be some compelling football action this weekend. Maybe there's not going to be a ton of down to the wire games, but maybe we'll have a surprise. You never know.
Yeah. So Levitt, I don't know what to do with them this year. I'm going to see Hathaway, I'm sure, at a basketball game, and I'm going to yell at him this year because I think I have gotten them wrong every single week this year.
Well, I'm sure he's happy if you're picking against them then, because
that's maybe it.
And they've got to love the fact that they're not the favorite. They're playing with house money. It's Freiburg's title to lose, and Levitt can just go in and be Levitt. He can be as creative as possible. And, I'd say never write them off till that horn sounds and the clock hits zero. But I would much rather be in Freiburg Academy's position at this point, being at home, almost upsetting Levitt last year when they were that unbeatable juggernaut. And, it feels like their time is now. What do you make of that North game, the C North game? Does Madomic have a chance?
Yeah, they do. So I saw them play earlier this year. That's the other game other than Thornton Academy and Noble that was competitive during the season. So I got there. That was early in there's a couple factors here that, and I haven't seen Herman since, and they've been fantastic since. It was 14-0 when I got there. It finished 14-8, and Madomik was driving with a chance to win late. Yeah. What I know about them is they replaced their entire offensive line, and their leading rusher is a freshman. And so they are considerably better than they were in week 1 or week 2, whichever one it was that they played Herman. So, I mean, I think I'm a little biased here, but I think they can win this game. But I also think Herman just laid the smackdown on Oceanside in the semifinals. So I think that could be a really, really good game.
Yep. Yeah,
that might be the best one of the lot.
It might be, and I think just law of averages, you're bound to have a couple that come down to the wire that are memorable, and probably several that aren't so much. But these powerhouse teams are powerhouse teams. You have to appreciate them for what they are, and you just hope everyone gets out healthy, and you have the best possible matchups for Gold Ball Saturday, because there are potentially some great matchups in that game if you want to look ahead an extra week.
Yeah, the Gold Ball games could be amazing because if everything holds according to seeding or plan, I mean, these are some really interesting games. And to your health point, I just go to these games and I see the basketball coaches standing there watching,
holding their breath.
Holding their breath, just don't get hurt, man. Just don't get hurt.
Well, the fact that the seasons overlap, so you're not going to have a football player get into basketball shape for a while, even in a best case scenario. But these are good. These are good problems to have. There aren't that many schools that have to deal with it. But then you look at Portland and Deering; they're going to play on Thanksgiving Day, regardless of what happens to them in these next 2 rounds of playoffs. So you're going almost to the start of basically a week and a half before the start of countable basketball games, and it's kind of a mad dash here. I feel like there's no time off in between. I mean, usually it gets come up for air a little bit for a couple of weeks. I just feel like this year there's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be a thing where Skowhegan would start slow in basketball every year because they had all those football players.
Sure.
And their team was just half their team was on the football team.
Right.
And then you'd go, geez, what's wrong with Skowhegan this year? Like, oh, right. They had a deep run in football. Okay.
Yeah. That's forgotten by February, but at least it's an interesting storyline early in the season.
Why? Actually, I've never understood. Why do they play this game on Thanksgiving? I've never gotten a reation for that.
It goes back to
it's always been done.
It goes back to the early 20th century. I mean, this is something that's nationwide. I mean, you have Thanksgiving Day games all over the place. In some states, they're countable games. Some states they're leading into postseason, not at the end of the season like we do here. I think it's just a traditional thing. I think there was one year that there wasn't a game because there was so much snow, like in 1920 or something, that people couldn't get to the stadium. 1959, before the current playoff system, it was actually the state championship game because both Deering and Portland entered undefeated. The folks at Deering still talk about that game because they won. It's one of the highlights in their program history. It's certainly the most famous of the Thanksgiving Day games. And honestly, the last 10 years or so, that game has lost a lot of luster. But this year, with both teams being so strong, I think you're going to see more interest. And, I haven't been to one of these in years, and I think I might have to check it out because it's going to be fun. One or both might be coming off a trip to the state final 5 days earlier. So, instead of just being this curiosity that not a whole lot of fans go to anymore, I think you're going to see more interest this year.
How did it become the state championship game? That seems
because
crazy.
There was no, I think it was considered the de facto championship game. The fact that both teams were clearly the best teams, and the fact that they were playing each other this one time. Why not make it into it's not like back in the old days with the AP and the UPI where which polls we're going to have a split winner, but it was pretty clearly understood that whoever won that game was going to be considered the championship team, and it was Deering that year. I think it was a classic back and forth game too, and I did some studying up on it years ago, but it's something that I know if you go to Deering High School, they still talk about that and have some artifacts about that game there.
Was it a thing where they didn't play? They weren't in the same bracket.
Yeah, it's possible they didn't play in the regular season. I just don't remember. You think they would,
Yeah.
but
I'm wondering if they
I don't
if they
recall the
each won
details.
their class and then they were just
Yeah.
like, oh well, let's do
Well,
it.
I mean, they had to have been in this. I think there was just one class back then. I mean, there weren't that many teams. I think there
Right.
was the large school class, maybe a few smaller teams, but again, you're talking 65 years ago at this point, and that must have been something to see.
That's just craziness.
Yeah.
Huh. Have you heard anything? Have you checking out this situation in Rhode Island at all? Have you seen this?
I have not.
Where
No.
a team sued because their seating is wrong, and they tried to stop the whole playoffs.
Wow, that's opening up a potential can of worms here.
The judge is like, guys, you're still in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Well, I guess we live in a litigious society, and that's taken it to the nth degree.
Yeah, I was reading up on it last night and for the newsletter, and it's just an insane situation where they didn't fill out a form, and then they decided that this game counted for this amount, and the state went, no, it doesn't. What are you talking about?
Well, we thought the heel points were wacky. Okay.
Right. Yeah, it's way weirder than the heel points. It's like an out-of-state game that became a countable game. And
right.
It's like a co-op school and all this insane stuff. And I'm just trying to imagine that happening here. And I'm imagining the Facebook drama around it.
It would be quite a story, quite a drama. I just, I guess we'll just be thankful we don't have to deal with anything like that.
Yet, I think is the key thing.
That's true.
So who do you think ends up on the top of these at the end when it's all said and done? Who do you think our state champions are?
I think Portland TA, if it comes to that, is basically a coin flip. Portland was. I thought TA was clearly the team to beat until Portland went down there, and physically they just matched up for them, man for man. They made the big play late in the game to get the winning touchdown. TA lost to Portland last year in the regular season, beat them in the state game. Portland's well aware of that. Portland's been the bridesmaid. They've been to 5 state games since 2015. They haven't won any of them, including the last 2 years, including last year's loss to TA. They haven't won a gold ball since 2002. This is a group that has a lot of key contributors who are seniors. They would love to get it done. But how do you bet against TA, on Gold Ball Saturday? It's just they're so tough. The game would be at Fitzy, which is quote unquote Portland's home field, although I don't really feel like that's a factor in that game. So I really feel like, if we do get that matchup, I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a touchdown difference either way. Class B has the potential. If Falmouth makes it, it's great for me having them in my coverage area. The fact they've never been, this is a defensive dynamo. This team is unbelievable how few points they give up. The story, they were 2-6 last year. They had to forfeit a game during the regular season. They had to have a coaching change after some of the players and families pushed back. But Spencer Emerson has come in and everything has turned to gold. I'm sure he's hoping that one more thing is going to turn to gold, but that's still a couple weeks away. But you get potentially a Falmouth Kennebunk matchup. Kennebunk can score a ton of points. Falmouth doesn't give up a lot of points. That's got the potential to be a classic game too. So if that's how it shakes out, sign me up. I'll be there all day.
Yeah, I think that could be a really, really interesting game, and that's sort of one of the ones where you're like, if you told me that's a 3 touchdown game in either direction, I'd be like, okay. And if you told me it was tied with 2 minutes left, I'd be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's who imposes. If it's a higher scoring game, it probably favors Kennebunk. If Falmouth gets to play their defensive, style and limits what Kennebunk can do, Falmouth can score points too. So I mean, they could win either way, but. It's always nice to get fresh blood, first time in a long time, first time ever. Those are always my kind of favorite stories to write. And, we're one win away from getting that possibility with Falmouth.
And you think Freiburg's definitely the team to beat in C?
I do. I wouldn't say they're unbeatable, but yeah, I think they're clearly the team to beat. And, you look at Levitt and Cape and, the last few years, they've been pretty dominant in that state game. So, presuming they can take care of business, and it's very possible that regional final will be their biggest test, just like it was Levitt's biggest test last year.
And then, so if we get to D, we would have, in theory, Fox Foxcroft, and Wells.
Right. And I think, if you go back to August, that's probably what I would have predicted. Not that I'm good at predicting, but I think those teams were the clear favorites. And, Winthrop's had a great season, but, Wells they're so good. And this is a program that year after year, they replace guys, they stay at that top level. They've had to pass some big tests here during the regular season, and including a win over Freiburg Academy. They're until someone knocks them off, they're always going to be the team I say is the team to beat.
Yeah, and then we'll find out this week for
right.
Man.
Yeah. I mean, I really like.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I really like Old Orchard. If you can hold them under 50, it's a victory. Last year they ran into the trouble in the state final, though, so you never know. And then I think that Greeley Mount Ararat game, like I said, they played just a couple weeks ago, 30-26 up in Topsom. Greeley won it. That's one of the reasons they were able to get a bye, and they only had to have the semifinal game where Mount Ararat's had to play a couple games, and they really look like they're peaking. So, that Greeley team, they can move the ball up and down the field, on the ground, in the air. And then, of course, you got the singular sensation, the great player Dash Farrell for Mount Ararat. I mean, it's everything you want in a state final. Great individual talent, great teams. Greeley's certainly on a mission after coming so close last year, where they came out of nowhere and then lost in the state final. So that one really, I think, has the potential to be an instant classic.
Where are they playing that?
That is at Kennebunk High School, 11 o'clock Saturday, and then the Old Orchard Beach game follows.
That is a long drive.
Not for me, thankfully. That's an easy Saturday for me. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just read the 5,000 word story on
yes,
that one.
If you want to hold it, I should have that up by Saturday evening. Yeah.
That's such a big factor. It's like, oh, that's far.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's like, is it near the highway or the turnpike? If so, it's a lot easier to, even the drive to Bangor's piece of cake that way, as opposed to going somewhere backwater like Massabesic, Sanford, that, is really not that far, but you can't get there quickly. Even going to Gorham from here is difficult. So
the drive to Bangor and to Hamden from here is terrible. It's like all back roads, and like there's no cell reception for a good 20 minutes, and there's weird turns, and if you don't know the road,
you better be paying attention.
You gotta be paying attention, and there's at least 2 spots where if you don't know that the road turns here, it's gonna split, and you're on some on some dirt road 5 minutes later. Yeah, it's just no fun.
I hear you.
All right, so let's pivot to basketball. I think. What are some of in your coverage area? What are some of the schools you think are gonna be a surprise? That if we're up, if someone's up in Bangor, they'd be like, geez, I had no idea they were going to be this good this year.
Yeah, I haven't even started thinking about basketball yet. What I'm hearing, down here on the boys' side, Deering's supposed to be very good. South Portland could be very good. Portland, I expect, will always be there. I think Cheverus will be very good too. As far as, and Falmouth, definitely, I think in Class A is going to be a team to beat. Certainly,
Halligan will get to those 600 wins.
I like his chances, yes. And then some, and he'll probably blow right through to 700 the way this is going. But they're good. I think on the girls' side, the question for me is how good will Cheverus be? They lost Maddie Fitzpatrick to the University of Maine. Ruth Bowles had the great season she had last year. They did bring in the Lamson girl from TA to play point guard, so that gives them a boost. But are they going to be championship caliber? I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I've got a ton of new coaches down here in this area on the girls' side. So, I think 5 or 6 of the schools in this area have new coaches. So, including South Portland, who could be very good. Brianne Maloney, a former Red Riots player, is now coaching, and they came close last year. Can they make that jump? It's going to be a fun season, and once I can get through all this football stuff, I'll really start thinking about it in earnest. But ask me again in a month. I think I could speak a lot more intelligently at that point.
Have you gotten a sense? The team that I kind of have circled down there, and I don't know if they're in your coverage area or not, but the team I have circled down there is the Biddeford girls.
Yeah,
you might a team that looks interesting.
Right, and I think they were on the cusp of doing something last year. They're not in my coverage area, but I am familiar with them. I think I saw them once or twice last season, and I think they have the potential to. I don't know who the clear favorite. Brunswick probably has taken a step back. I don't think so. Who steps into that void this season? That's going to be interesting. Freeport's been competitive. They have a new coach. Greeley isn't the powerhouse that they once were. So yeah, someone's going to have to step up there. Mount Airy, I was really close last season. I think graduation took its toll on them too. So that seems like, to me, at least without knowing a whole lot, like that's going to be a wide open region.
Well, that and Biddeford's in B South because they got relegated.
Right. Oh, you're right. Okay.
So they'll still be there for another year, which is another region that has a big void.
Yes.
All of a sudden,
it does.
with Haley Breen leaving.
I was going to say a Breen-sized void. Yes.
Yeah, 2 of them.
No question. Yeah, I mean that's changed dramatically overnight. So,
yes, that's a region I have no idea who's going to win that.
Yep. No, that's a great point. It could be Biddeford if they put it all together.
Yeah, I just remember I saw them. So I saw them in the prelims because they played Lincoln Academy in the prelims, and that's 5 minutes away. And I was like, well, I'll definitely go to that. And then that quarterfinal game against Oceanside when what's her first? Crump, I think is her last name. When she just started shooting NBA threes and they're all going in, and you're like, what? That's your offense, man. That's just just let her do that the whole game.
Absolutely. If she's hitting, it's going to be tough to match up.
Yeah. All right. So how are we doing on time? We're doing all right. Okay. Do you think we're going to get shot clocks? I have to ask everybody this. And I asked this so much that a football official was giving me grief about it.
Right.
What do you think the timeline is on shot clocks?
Between here and the end of time, I don't know. I just don't. I still don't see the movement with the powers that be that would make it happen. I know why people want it. I'm sure the vast majority of fans and coaches want it, but I still don't think it's right around the corner. It's not that imminent. And you probably know more than I do, but that's my impression is, I'm not hearing big things about it happening soon.
I'm hearing rumblings. So some states do a thing where the bigger schools get it first. And so like we would have maybe say AA and A would do it.
Okay.
And then, and then very quickly it gets like added to all of them because then C and D and B go, wait, well, we want the shot clock too.
Sure. No, of course. I would think if anything, maybe the Class D schools would get it first, They
would need it. They would need it more, I would think.
I don't know.
Or maybe loosen the rules a little bit where it's like you don't have to have the official one that's got the really expensive one. Maybe we get a cheaper one. I have a strategy that will solve it instantly, and no one will ever do it because it's too good of an idea. You just say we're going to turn the shot clocks on for the tournament, and if you want to have shot clocks during the regular season, great. And if not, then you can adjust during the tournament to having the shot clock. Yeah. And I think a lot of schools will find money for a shot clock real fast.
No, I agree with you because all of a sudden you're at a disadvantage if you don't have it. No question. No,
all these schools that are like, oh, we can't afford it. They're like, oh, look at that. We found one.
Right. Oh, yeah, just happen to have one stored away in a back closet somewhere now. The fact that they're doing instant replay in select instances now is big time progress. So, maybe I'm wrong. I'll believe it when I see it. I've been doing this for almost 25 years, and it's always been a topic of conversation. And until I certainly see the aesthetically pleasing reasons for having it, but again, it's just until I see it, I'll believe it then.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. So this is a question I ask a lot of people. So they are gonna, let's say we put you in charge of the MPA for a day. Okay. I may have asked you this last time you were on, but we'll do it anyway. They give you dictator power. You can do whatever you want. What's the thing you do? What's the rule you change for any sport?
What I do is strictly for selfish reasons for me is I split up some of these championships like field hockey and soccer, have them be a week apart instead of the same Saturday. Baseball, softball, lacrosse, they don't all need to be that lacrosse should be the week before, have baseball, softball finish things up. I would love to see basketball go back to where the big tournament was separate. I feel like now especially the quarterfinal round when it's getting played on campus, it doesn't feel like a tournament environment whatsoever.
No.
So, I mean, things like that again, largely are due to the fact that I'd like to be able to see as many things as I can. Those would certainly be at the top of my list.
Can I pitch you an idea for the state games for basketball where each class gets their own day?
I'd love it. I
because
feel like, wasn't it years ago where like Class D would be on a Thursday and then like B would
I
be on a
think so.
Friday, and it used to be spread out a little bit more. No, I believe me. I would like to, again, I'd say let's do, A, B, C, and D one weekend and then finish up
Mhm.
the double A's, have them finish up the season the following week. Yeah, if you lose that one class, you can do it Thursday, Friday, Saturday, noon, or kind of deal. And yeah, I think the more exposure you get to a state game, all eyes should be on you.
Yeah,
I, you wouldn't need much to pitch me on that.
because it's so cool. Like the B game has its own day, and it's
Yes.
all by itself, and
Yep.
everybody watches the B game, and
Right.
no one watches the D game because
And
it's
it's
on at
just
the same time.
yeah, it's just a strange phenomenon.
Yeah, I
So,
think that would be great, and I think that would be awesome for the D schools, the C schools,
yes.
and we kind of owe it to them in a sense.
Absolutely, and let's televise them, please, and then
Mhm.
because then sometimes that doesn't always happen either. But yeah, I mean the tournament, it's a unique thing in Maine high school sports. It's the crown jewel. I always say that those couple weeks, there's nothing like it. It's intensely busy and all that. But if you're a Maine high school sports fan, that gets more attention than anyone else. And I really feel like that. All those teams, all those games, really should be in the limelight as much as possible without having to share it.
Yeah, I 100% because like you're not going to watch the D game if the double A game is
Of course you're
close.
not. Of course you're not,
You
unless you're
know,
invested in one of those teams. No.
right? Unless it's your team
Yeah.
or your kids are on that team or whatever it is.
Right. We
What's
are in agreement.
awesome? What's the best improvement you've seen in your time doing this? Like, what's like one thing that in the years you've been doing this has made the biggest difference?
Oh my goodness. That's something I'm not even sure I can answer. I think, as time goes on, certainly I think the quality of play in a lot of sports is better. I think you can argue in some cases maybe not so much, but I feel like there's more opportunities, more exposure, certainly more opportunities and out of season for a lot of kids, not for everyone because not everyone can afford it. But I think you see that the ability to play year round certainly elevates the quality of play during the high school seasons, and in a lot of certainly sports like soccer. You definitely see more of that now, and it's great to see in basketball some of these best players from Maine are going on and really stealing some headlines now on a
Yeah.
national level. I mean that speaks well for a sport that I don't think nationwide too many people think of Maine as being a basketball powerhouse.
Yeah, we were talking about that during the Camden Scarborough game on the sideline there, about how much the level of play has improved in soccer,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out what the factor was there. And I was kind of wondering, is part of it that in the 80s you couldn't watch soccer
No.
like anywhere,
Right.
like Pele,
Now
I think was on
it's
TV
everywhere.
every so
Right.
often.
That's right. You're absolutely. And before like the '94 World Cup, there was no there was a long stretch where there was no professional league and certainly nothing on television. So yeah, I mean now you want to get up on a weekend morning, you can go find a game anywhere from overseas. And look at the fact we're going to have the World Cup here again in a couple of years. Yeah, I mean I think soccer is burgeoning and it's only going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and then to your basketball point, so I was at a summer game this past summer, and someone comes up, I won't say who it was, and they go, "This Cooper flag thing, there's a limit to this, right? There's a ceiling somewhere." And I was like,
Hasn't hit it yet.
Man.
Yeah.
No. No, and I'm just every time, you're watching him at Duke, and you're like, okay.
Yeah. Well,
Let's keep going.
no, I mean it's wonderful for kids from Maine to be able to look up to someone like him and say, I mean, everyone says they want to go play here or there or the NBA or whatever, but
Yeah.
99,000 times out of 100,000, it's total pipe dream. But he's making it tangible, and I think it's wonderful for basketball fans, certainly around here. And he's done incredibly well for himself, and he's really just getting started if you think about it.
I know, that's what's crazy about it is he's like 2 games into his college career, 3 games maybe.
Yeah.
How much of an impact do you think Ace is going to have in Orono?
anytime the University of Maine can get a big name or keep someone home, so to speak, it's just better for the. I mean, seeing that program be viable, I think would be wonderful. It would be great if they could compete for an America East title and just be one of the last team standings. And the women's team has done so well over the years, going way back to Coach Palumbo, and Coach Vachon's done a great job keeping them competitive year after year. It would be really nice to see the men's program do that too. And there's a lot of really good talent in the state that they could just keep home. And if they do, it's just going to create that much more interest for the casual fan.
Speaking of which, have you seen the USM roster?
No, I have not.
It's a who's who of Maine high school basketball players. Brady Saunders just had 39 points.
That's
I think
good.
Last night for them, and they got like 2 of the Ebert kids, and Galarraga from South Portland.
Oh wow, yeah, that's
there. There's like 5 or 6 names where you go, oh, I like that kid. He's good.
Well, that's great. Like, get back to my point. There's a lot of talent in this state. So, the more people you can keep home, the better. So many people have dreams of going away and playing somewhere else. And honestly, more often than not, they wind up coming home anyway. So, keep them home to begin with. And all these local schools are just going to benefit that much more.
Yeah, I think one of the things I always talk about is you're always going to have like the Cooper. Well, you're not always going to have the Cooper flags, but you get a Cooper flag, they're always going to go to Montverde because they should.
Right.
But can we make it so the Landon Clarks stay?
Right.
And the kids like that. And, you look at Mr. Basketball this year, the top 6 kids in that class are gone. 6, 7, something like that. And so, Mr. Basketball is going to be a guy who wouldn't have been a finalist.
Right.
And I think it's probably Jameer Rose is at the front runner.
He'd be probably the favorite at this point. I would say so.
Yeah. And it's just crazy that it's that much of a talent has left the state to go prep. And I think, somehow we got to figure out how much of that can we keep.
Yeah. And let's hope it's the majority, because like I say, that there's no shortage of really good kids that would really contribute strongly. I mean, these local schools would really benefit from having them, not just as players, but as bringing some interest into a program that might not have it. Just the fact that there's local kids playing there.
Yeah, I mean, the interest at Nokomis that one year was just off the charts.
Yeah, of course.
And for good reason.
And you probably won't see anything like that again, but it's a great example of how much interest does exist when there's reason for it too.
Yeah, that's anytime you see a school that's been down for a while. We saw with Noble last year when Noble got that tournament run.
Great story.
They had people coming out of the woodwork to go to that game. To go to those
games.
And
look at Greater Gloucester winning for the first time in 50 years. That's a community that does support its teams really well. So it's cool to see that validated at a level where you can win a championship.
Yeah, and we'll see who it is this year. I'm sure there'll be somebody who comes out of the woodwork.
It is. Can't wait to talk about it more once that's like center stage. But this fall stuff, we still got a couple more weeks to get through.
All right. I will let you go because you still have 5,000 words to write in your preview. Thanks so much for joining me. Where can people find all of your novellas?
Let's see. The easiest way is to go to pressherald.com/theforecaster.net or -net. I don't know wherever it is these days, but that's it lives on the Varsity Maine family of websites, and I tend to send a lot of stuff out on my Facebook page as well. But the easiest thing is just go to Varsity Maine, and stuff gets updated on a daily basis. And I get it up as quickly as I can, even if I have to stay up till the wee hours of the morning.
Awesome. And it's always, you're the gold standard of Maine high school sports journalism, I think, or at least one of the gold standards. I don't want
That's kind of you. Thank you. There's a lot of good people out there.
There are, and you've always been very supportive of me, so I appreciate that.
No, my pleasure. You do great work. It's nice to have all these different voices and opinions and just different ways to look at things. I think that's wonderful. And if you're a fan, I think it's great to be able to have a lot of different places to go and be able to read about your favorite teams and players and get different perspectives. I think that's just great for everybody.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. And
thanks for having me.
Somewhere.
Very soon, I'm sure.
All right.
All right, that's the show. Thanks again to Michael Hoffer for joining me. You can read him at The Forecaster of Varsity Maine. Follow him on Twitter, all the places. I've actually started a Blue Sky account because Twitter's not doing great. So if you're on Blue Sky, you can find Maine basketball rankings at mebballrankings.bsky.social. That's how Blue Sky works. So I'm going to start transitioning over to there a little more. My personal account, I think I've dumped Twitter. I think I'm done with it for my personal account, but there's a lot of the basketball stuff is still on Twitter, and a lot of teams post their scores there. So I kind of have to be over there and able to get scores in order to get scores. So anyway, that's it for the show. This has been a production of MaineBasketballRankings.com, your source for the most comprehensive coverage of Maine high school basketball from Ashland to York and everywhere in between. This podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts and a bunch of places you don't. If you enjoy it, please leave a nice review because it really does help out with algorithms. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Thanks for listening.